Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. I'll dive into it. The title is called The Meshing of Infinite Archetypes with Human Psychology. And so I want to speak about axiology and a street smart angle towards it, and how in some sense our value system leads towards questions of physics, and the questions of physics lead to the questions of metaphysics. It cannot be ignored. In the same way we have space and matter, we have that which is externally real and that which is internally real. What I mean by, I would say, infinite archetypes and the meshing of human psychology, it's like before I can dive into that, I have to share how the model I'm using to divide reality. In 2013, I wrote a book, and in that book I drew a geometrical symbol. And the geometrical symbol was an inverted triangle, and a circle was around it. The circle was a representation of nature, was a metaphor for nature, and every point in the inverted triangle had a specific association. So I had considered that really when a person opens their eyes in this world and wonders what's going on here, they find the self, then they find others, then they find their world. And even before finding others, the self has a relationship with itself, has a relationship with the world, and then it has a relationship with individualized components of the world, which are others. Our sense of self has a relationship with nature, which is the world. Our sense of self has a relationship with others, which are a part of nature, but they are not us. And our sense of self has a relationship with the totality of existence. So in some sense, we can actually classify it as how aware we are that we are aware. There's some people on this planet, we can say that they are aware of themselves. That means they understand themselves better than other people. You know, we can say that there are some people who understand others better than themselves. This is very possible, especially for people who have not really spent time developing, polishing their character through outer realm experiences. But then there is the world, and these are stations, I consider them. Just like we have bus stations, train stations, I feel in the human individualism, ladies and gentlemen, it's a station. Right now, me being here, it's kind of like a sort of state of mind where the individual is the mover of the moment. If I was, let's say, back in the day, like, in World War II, I was a soldier on a battlefield, then in some sense, it is others moving myself. Let's say the commands of, those people in charge. And let's say there was no others, it was just me and the world would own me. So what I mean by this, let me see if I could find a gentler song for this episode. Okay, this should be fine. So, I'll kind of begin again. These are the relationships I perceive when it comes to human existence. And the idea of the meshing of infinite archetypes with human psychology has to do with how we are being a self as we walk into the future. So let's start from one point of this symbology that I've shared with the listener, these three dimensions of life, or three dimensions to the moment, self, other, and world. When it comes to the self, like one point of a triangle, is connected to two other points. So the self has a relationship with others, primarily. That means when we open our eyes, we're looking first person point of view out of our eyes. And so that means first we don't consider ourselves, really it is access to the world. So we actually can know others and the world, and until we discovered a mirror or some sort of reflection tool, we began understanding that there's a shape to the self, right? Because if there was no reflective opportunity, just take this in, that imagine the human being was in a scenario where the eyes could never see the face. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine creatures just roaming first person view, and suddenly they see themselves in like their reflection in, like, I don't know, in ice, or what do you call it, in a still pond, or maybe they see their shadow. These are all self-reflective kind of factors to the intelligence of the human being in its evolution. So the self has a relationship with others and the world. That means every human being must, in this lifetime, somehow experience the other, the visible other, I would say, and an invisible other. The invisible other is, in traditional thought, acknowledges the logos. The visible other is your physical neighbor. So the logos is kind of like our invisible neighbor, poetically. Now there is the visible world, and there is an invisible world, right? But now we don't acknowledge the invisible world, but if we did, it would be equivalent to the logos. Because what we consider to be beyond the dimension is also that which encompasses the dimension. So it's as if I'm a person saying that, yes, there is a visible world, we're in it, we can see it, but the visible is surrounded, is contained by the invisible. The known universe is contained by an unknown universe. Now we can choose to make it into two different universes, or it's one universe that has an unknown component and known component. Human beings can have their preferences kind of input here. So when it comes to yourself, we have to find a strategy to work with other human beings, your fellow species members and advanced civilizations crew, the pilots, as I refer to. So we have to be able to work with others. We have to be able to work with the world. This is primarily the outer realms consideration. The outer realms, like, most people, they don't care how they feel. They actually care how the world is making them feel, right? Because really, I've seen too many stories in human history and literature where the person has sacrificed themselves for something great. Whether it's a superhero sacrificing all his strength to shield the species from some evil, or in some sense, if it's a mother sacrificing herself for her children, it's like there has been intense stories in history that the mind can imagine, but even though the history books have not recorded. So when it so before I'm pretty much going to talk about how infinity kind of meshes in with the human psychology as we go into the future. I'm just explaining this self-world other model I have, right? So for those who are a self, their purpose in life is others and it is their world. For those who, in some sense, are the world, their purpose is the self and the other. And for those who are the other, which is impossible unless there is maybe collectivism, unless maybe There is, like right now, every person has a body and every person has a mind, right? And we have not had an incident where it's like one mind has multiple bodies, right? We have not reached there. But it will be a possibility. And so that experience would be the other. And really, the relationship with an other is kind of like a relationship with a clone of one's existential circumstances. Ultimately, it's just self and world, but there's, I mean, here, I'll stay true to the model. I'll say this. Let's say you're a human being, okay? Let's say you're a moment of intelligence. Let me just actually say it like this. Let's say you're a moment of intelligence, and you open your eyes and you find yourself in a biological body, and you look at the world and you see there's a giant, landscape called the world, and there's others, and it's similar to you, right? So really, for the self, all its options is learn from others, learn from the world. Those become your great mirrors, others in the world. And then let's say you eventually master a relationship with other creatures in the realm, and you master a relationship with the totality of your world, right? But then you realize in order to attain totality, one has to also master their relationship with themselves, right? So pretty much it's like I'll say it's like SS, I'll say it like this, it's like SO, self to other, SW, self to world, and then we have self to self, okay? Then we have a relationship of others to self. And, we have a relationship of others, I'll say it like this, we have a relationship with others, with the world. That means there's a way others are experiencing the world. There's a relationship of others with others. There's that, and then there's a relationship of others. Sorry guys, I'm messing this up. There's a self. This self has a relationship with others, with the world, with itself. That's the first set. Then we have the second set where it's as if others have a relationship with others, others have a relationship with their world, others have a relationship with themselves, right? The other is being prioritized. And then there's another set where we have a world that has a relationship with self, a world that has a relationship with others, and a world that has a relationship with the world, right? So we went from SO, SW, SS, we went from OO, OW, OS, then we went from W, OWW, WS. And I don't know if people are following me, and hopefully this isn't on mute. So these are the basic psychological relationships. Language is a dualistic system, but consciousness is a triangular system. I'm telling you, consciousness is really that which is observing the duality. Anytime you notice the good and bad, it's as if that which is aware of both the good and bad simultaneously can't be good or bad. Do you see what I mean? Now I want to make this a bit more complex. Those sets that I shared with you. And let me see if I could find a picture from my book, actually. Hang on, folks. Let me... 100% I could find a picture for you. Right now. Alright. I don't know why, guys. It's not letting me see the first. Hang on, guys. Hang on. Okay, there we go. So these pictures I'm going to show you is from a book I wrote in 2013 called The Great Work. It's a book where I won't recommend people to buy it. It was pretty much like a work of art, kind of like a message in a bottle kind of type of book, okay? But let me see if I can find it again. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Here, guys. So if you look at your screen, if you look at the video, the screen of the video, I'm going to show you something. This is taking longer than intended. Hang in there, people, you know. So here it is. So if people look at the screen, this is a fragment from my book. This book I wrote, you know, it was more like a kind of like antenna, you know, receiving a signal moment. But if people look closely at the triangles, right, you'll see the relationship I'm suggesting. It's as if three angles now. I forgot to mention, I've also oh my god, I'm skipping things which I shouldn't. Okay, anyways, these three relationships are important, whether it's the triangle and the circle or the circle and the triangle. Once a fractal relationship one has with this geometrical shape, it's an endless relationship of the totality of nature and the fragmentation of nature, right? And this is like something that is happening in the universe, whether we like it or not. Forces are joined and then forces break. They join, they break, they join and break. And in the middle of this, as consciousness runs through these loops, whereas this dolphin jumps up and down of water, eventually it recognizes what it is, right? And so what it is ultimately the realization that actually for the first time on this earth, man can become, at least in his inner realms, an infinite being. Okay, I'll just read what it says here. What is being showed in this moment allows you to preserve a vaster reflection of your being that is being infinitely expressed. For you are infinite expression, thus you will no longer hold limited definitions. It should be that, but that are incapable, who are incapable of defining you when there is so much change occurring. Pretty much man is freeing himself, from others and the world, and realizing his nature. And then from nature we come to, from inner peace, there is a strange sort of not conditional clarity, but unconditional clarity. And then the intelligence reanimates. So think of us, human intelligence is some sort of strange biological computer, and this computer, from the beginning of its life, has been turned on once. and it hasn't been turned off. And I'm not talking about deep sleep and unconscious states. I'm just saying it in the sense that it's as if the computer restarts, and when it restarts, it closes all the applications present in its conscious domain, attains the unconscious, from the presence of the unconscious moves towards the conscious, as if reopening applications, and so the system restarts. So really what I would say the concept of enlightenment is, it is a collective reset. At least the likes of the type of enlightenment the ancients sought, right? Because there could be arguments made that in ancient times they had access to a type of world where the dimensions had not been sealed. Really honestly, we find this in Japanese mythology, and I would say metaphysics, where there's this concept of other dimensions simultaneous. Actually, in the religious traditions, I mean, if somebody has to say this, like in the religious ideology, there is the acknowledgement of beings in another dimension, whether they are angels or otherwise. You know, in Japanese thought, and the more we go back in ancient times, human beings had relationship with disembodied forces, but not forces that were disembodied in their inner realms. Do you know how many people on this planet have talked to angels? You know how many people have been motivated? You know how many rock stars have had a muse? You know, whether the muse was physical or it was just a moment, a non-physical muse, you know. You know, there is a reason William Blake wrote about the daughters of inspiration, you know, as if there is another dimension, and man has forgotten it, and it was necessary for him to forget it, because the moment we forget our true state, we have an opportunity to find it again. And for an eternal being, that is a luxury. That means it's like we are in the, you know, one of the high quality dimensions of this realm. There are many dimensions that could be way lesser quality, way lesser moral resolution, you know. Just like the resolution of a video can be changed. It's as if the resolution of the morality of how the universe happens in other dimensions is different. So, time to take this up a notch. So right now, pretty much, I've shared 3 categories: self, world, and other, okay? Now, this self, world, and other, I have something where I call it Ring of the Absent Heaven. And it's this model. I've pretty much done something where I think it's, I don't know, I mean, like in my universe, I was surprised that I managed to build this kind of like system of thought. But, so what I've done is I thought that if in the future, I don't have kids, but I thought if in the future I had kids and I had to explain what is going on, you know, with consciousness and existence in the simplest and shortest manner, and in a manner where it would be universal. So I thought about what's a universal model to, in some sense, look at life and be able to perceive everything that happens in life in it, right? So I attempted this, and I came back successful. You know, it's like kind of like that Spartan kid in like the movie where he jumps back with the spear killing a wolf, you know? I would say not as intense as that, but it's as if like I feel I have done some inner treasure revealing, and I'm trying to share this treasure. As if imagine somebody has found a crystal, you know, and they're like, yo, how do I tell people about this crystal state of mind I found, you know. You know, they say diamonds are forever, and you can totally see, you know, Vajra you know, Vajra gurus, you know, you can totally see like Tibetan Buddhist monks being like, yes, the diamond state is forever. Life is a magnificent display of a ridiculously large number of known and unknown variables. That is life simply. Now I'm just using geometry to in some sense filter a way that we can actually access it. So this model of the ring of the absent heaven, what is it? What is the simple way I've found to be able to, if I had children, share with them? It's really 0, 1, to infinity. Anybody who understands these 4 symbols, 0, 1, 2, infinity, these 4 symbols, you understand all the possible relationships of conscious existence, or even unconscious. It's these 4 symbols have such an incredible way to show the dimensions of nature, and in some sense anybody can use this model, right? So what would it mean? Let's say you're a person, I'll give you examples in any moment. Let's say you're a person who you are standing at, let's say, at your, let's say let's say you're a mountain climber hanging by a rope. Let's say you are an engineer about to build something. Let's say you are you're someone who has lost everything, and let's say you're someone who has won everything, right? Let's look at these states of mind. So how I would fit him into this model is, aside from pinpointing whether it's a relationship of self, world, or other, which one of that it is, I would say that, for example, the mountain climber hanging by the string, he has gone into a state where it's between 0 and 2. That means life and death. Life is duality, death is 0. Do you see? And life form, being a life form, is really duality. Life itself is a singular intelligence. So what that means, it's like there's one electricity, but it's going through various different dimensions, for example, right? Various different lamps are kind of brightening the universe, So when you tap into the electricity, kind of the energy level of things, that is a singular dimension of being. And let's say you're someone who has lost everything. You are either going from the dual to the void, or through the singular, or you're going from the singular to the void, or you are the void and you're returning to your state, right? I have created this concept in my science fiction of void beings, But anyways, that's for a different talk. Let's say somebody's like Mr.Within. What's up with language in the human species? I would use the system. Literally, I use this system, and I would say language is the number 2, so it is sandwiched between the singular and infinite. That means language has 2 ways it can go. It can go back into silence, or it can go towards infinite conception. Let's say you're a yogi who's meditated so much that you're like, I don't even know what, if there's a difference between my being and everything else. But let's say you're someone in the singular state. A lot of poetically and mythologically, a lot of gods that receive offerings by mankind, they are actually in the singular state. So seldom is this said, heaven is a world, to truly enter heaven means to truly transcend the dualism of the past. That's when your state of mind becomes very, I don't want to say enlightening, but it's like something changes from the karma of the moment. And you know what changes? It's as if for the first time the lords of karma stop giving you a hard time, and you recognize that everything, by the nature of origin of intelligent movement in space, is its perfection. That means you realize you're sandwiched between the void and the dual, between 0 and 2, right? A singular dimension. And now, and so what are the approaches? You go back into the void, or you, in some sense, try to go beyond dualism. And which means you return to your humanhood, and you try to go beyond the humanhood. You try to take the other exit out of duality, which is infinity. There's 2 exits, right? the singular or the infinite. Now, let's say you're an infinite being. Let's say you're an extraterrestrial, let's say in the future, an extraterrestrial lands, and this extraterrestrial is like, yo, human beings, I'm an infinite being, you can't touch this, and so the extraterrestrial is an infinite being. Then a philosopher would probably approach that, a philosopher that had heard this podcast would approach that extraterrestrial and say, okay, let's say you are an infinite being. You are sandwiched between the void and the dual. That means infinity has two exits from an infinite state. Let's say somehow somebody accessed a state of mind where they were an immortal in that state of mind. And you know how, for example, you put two reflections, you put two mirrors in front of one another, and you stand in between them, and there is this optical illusion of infinite reflections of the person, right? So let's say you find yourself in a state where, just like how numbers can infinitely go on, and we can't even know what the biggest number possibly is, right? We won't have enough paper, enough space to know it. We can say in the same way the psychology can access archetypes, and the archetype is already in its own immortal universe. So what that means is those people who can somehow have an inner realm experience of their spirit, they're technically trying to be immortal to themselves, But the point is that the nature of reality is simultaneous at once, and it is interdependent. And in its interdependence, it is free, right? So that means the person's like, wait a minute, let's say I free myself from all my, desires and ignorance, but wait a minute, at the end of it, is the world free though? Right? And so when will the species care for the freedom of the whole system rather than their only small corner? So I'm pretty much saying an infinite being is sandwiched between the void and the dual. And let's say a void being, as I was saying earlier, the void being is sandwiched between. That means if you are, let's say, sight in empty space, no body, nothing, it's just awareness in empty space. In a dream state, I've experienced this. Let's say you're just sight in empty space, you have two routes. You either, reverse back into, you go back towards the infinite, you remember the infinite, or you remember the singular. So pretty much emptiness can be born only, or it can in some sense remember its infinite. The singular can remember it doesn't exist, it is void, or it can become dual, and that's what we have done as a species. We are right now, me using language is a dualistic technology. People can challenge me on this, but I'm telling you, there's no other view to it, The moment we created the concept of good and bad, the moment in the dictionary, the word, this was there before I was born, guys. The dictionary, the concept of duality is in there. And so that means the moment human psychology noticed the good and bad, we turned one singular picture and we kind of cut it in two, and it became chaos and order. We look at a self. A self has two components, a body, and if you're a bodybuilder, you're maxing out your outer realms, and it has in some sense a mind. And if you're what is considered as an academic or an intellectual, which I feel those are outdated words, there's only communication here, and if we're conscious, we advance it. If we're unconscious, we in some sense have been our collapse before we collapse. So the self needs to have a relationship with the void, with the singular, with the dual, and the infinite. The other, that means other people on the planet, they also need to consider a relationship between 0, 1 to infinity, and then the world can be seen through this lens of 0, 1 to infinity. You know what that means? That means the person's like, forget me. It's like, what am I doing looking for my truth? There's a world here. What is the world's truth? You know, why am I looking for my soul when there's a world soul? And it's like, why am I looking for the world soul when there's the beyond the language threshold? Beyond the language threshold means that I have found the edge of the mind conceptually. And I've termed it the language threshold, you know, which I feel it is the most important concept in the educational system. That means I'm just waiting. I don't know, it's like when I'll exit this realm, but I'm just waiting, watching. I'm like, all right, planet, let's see if you figure it out. You know, if you figure out that everything is a rare opportunity. Do you see what I mean? There's only one philosophy here, you know, and that is gratefulness that our intelligent sight participated in the human event. Because the edge of the sky cannot be seen. And you know, this is why the philosopher laughs when he realizes this, and the scientist cries. The scientist cries because no ruler can measure the infinite. And if there's a chance there's infinite intelligence, if there's a chance there are timeless states, that means there is no change, but being has its own mysterious dimensions, nonetheless. We have to honor all those human beings on this planet who saw something more than their sensory perception, and we have to honor all those people on the planet who tried so hard to establish the sensory perception. And the only route is that instead of us judging reality, we shift. We should literally elevate and then look at reality, you know? I think every person as a self, they require to confront the void. It's just part of life. You know, there's absent moments. There's moments where there's a glass of water full, and there's moments where that glass of water falls, and in some sense even emptiness of the container breaks. So this world can literally, you know, we're like a kitten in the box, and the moment we stop breathing, it's as if the kitten has been pulled out of the box of the simulation of the senses. And it's as if, at least in Tibetan metaphysics, they have this concept in the Tibetan Book of the Dead where they call it the bardo. And pretty much in Tibetan culture, when a person passes away, they cremate their body, and for 40 days a group of, like, you know, meditating monks go there and just chant these sutras as if trying to guide this being who's lingering around its own, flame of an ending, right? So it's very important that we advance civilization, but at the same time not forget that there is a heartbeat, and a heartbeat surpasses logic. There's some things in life that it's like no reasoning can justify it. It's just the sense that one has to be sensitive and care for nature, you know. One of the challenges of the human species is to in some sense establish a global community where human beings entertain universal archetypes, and for the first time the species becomes not its big brother like an Orwellian nightmare, but becomes the older brother of civilization, you know, so of every individual on the planet, right? So when I think of the advanced species, it's kind of like, you know, I have a twin brother, but it's, in my experience, it's like the older brother I never had, but it's the whole civilization's attitude towards the evolution of the human ability. Anyways, others, when it comes to self, anything that is not the self must also confront the void, the singular, the dual, and the infinite. So that means the visible self, you know, the known self, you confront those 4 dimensions. The unknown self, you confront those four dimensions. The known world, you confront all those 4 dimensions. The unknown world, you confront those 4 dimensions, you know. The unknown other, you confront those four dimensions. The known other, you confront those four dimensions. That means we are in some sense establishing a new era of human psychology where we are not afraid of infinity. We just can categorize it as 1/4 of dimensional possibility. The possibility of how the dimension can be perceived. And I'm telling you, there is a geometry to thought. Why? Because thought actually is an image. And when images move together, as if multiple frames move, let's say, for example, in films, it's 24 frames per second. In some sense, we begin to see through a sort of attention piloting through form, an animation of intelligence, right? And anytime one is in a complex moment, they can kind of slow down the film, they can stop the film, and they can observe, as an audience member, as if if a person is having issues with their body, their mind is like observing their body. If the person has issues with their mind, their soul is witnessing their body. And what is the soul? The soul is the presence of the original earth. That means I noticed that when it comes to the concept of, let's say, I don't want to say it, but let's say mental illness, right? When it comes to that concept, there's many human psychologies that are kind of like, I would say, in dramatic simulations with themselves. So human beings have to, in some sense, have an ability to step out of their mind and just be a simple, biological animal on the surface of the earth, but also have to have an ability of the sophistication of, the overlays of meaning from your mind. So what that means is life is an unknown adventure, yet at the same time, what we know, we care for. As if every idea matters when it comes to matter's vision, because the more you see, the more the context of the world changes for then to come a new decision. So the meshing of infinite archetypes with human psychology is going from duality to infinity. So I could tell you the future will consciously enter the void, even though we may, as biological entities, for now hovering in subjective simulations, kind of like we may not be able to see the greatness of the species, but because we lived for it, it's as if when the species accesses its great state, we were a part of it. You see what I mean? It's like it's ultimately like a chess game between the known and the unknown. And so, based on human behavior, we will go towards the singular, the infinite, or the void. If we make too many mistakes, the species goes towards the void quickly. And you know what happens anytime we get to the void? Anytime there's a fear of death, there is for the first time a transcendental desire. The desire of a union where the guilt is not individualized. So what that means is people live their life through a story. And this story changes all the time. But if we don't let it change naturally, we become hollow simulations of the what-ifs of the past. Like I honor my ancestors, but I realize that my ancestors did not want me to behave like them, but simply because they behaved like themselves. It's as if a modern human being behaves like the past, they're missing out on the novelty they can bring into the present. one's infinite self is really the echo of how the dualism is content with the singular and the void, and all that is left is the infinite. Because if you're a person who has an issue with the idea of a great collective humanity, that means you have an issue with union. And meditation, like spiritual practice, or what some would call Sorry guys, there's an issue with the computer. Hang on. I think the universe is telling me to change the song by closing the old browser, Human psychology is a dualistic position. We haven't experienced infinite archetypes yet, and infinite archetype would be a liberated principle. That means if you see someone on the planet being true to the nature of their design rather than what design has to be nature, it's as if there's something strange that happens. If the world was a door, it's as if honesty is like the way you move the key in it and the door opens. But dishonesty, and when I say honesty and dishonesty, I'm not talking about the outer realms, because in the outer realms it's just animals making sound on a rock in the middle of nowhere. But in the inner realms, but in the inner realms, if one is not honest, they become possessed. They become possessed by their past. Because the whole aim of the idea of the unknown and the divine is that it is new. Because if it wasn't new, how would you notice it? You know? There should be a percentage of human beings who dedicate their life to understand the relationship of duality with the singular. A lot of spiritual people are doing this. There should be a certain percentage of the population that wonders about the relationship of duality with duality, and there should be a percentage of the population that wonders about the relationship of duality with, in some sense, the void. And a percentage of the population, the relationship of duality with infinity. So what that means is we embrace the first headquarters of human psychology globally, the idea of the dualistic human being in a world where the cosmos, as the earth turns, it's like the on and off switch of the great lighthouse of creation is like taking place, you know. So the light is constantly on, off, on, off. You can totally see how that had an influence on the evolution of the human psychology, you know? That means I will tell you, just like how children are raised by their parents, conscious biological intelligence was raised by sunlight. That means the first parent of, you can say, consciousness was light. Light was the first to access the intelligent particle. A dualistic technology for modernity's sake, is again best treated as a like an Iron Man suit, but I would say a suit made of words, and how those words are images. They harbor images. So beyond dualism, let's say we reach a point in society where somebody people they've had it. They've been bored with this endless good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, and the person's like, okay, I've had it with this, and the person's like, I'm gonna go become an infinite being, right? And so imagine globally, all over in the streets, people are like, we're tired of duality. We wanted to change the infinite. Imagine like a hypothetical scenario like that. Right? Imagine the human being like, okay, what else more than just this endless dance of chaos and order? It's like, I've seen the show before. What else exists in existence? What have our eyes not found, which it has already found our eyes? And it's really important, because when a person, I gotta say this on a side note in regards to any person who, let's say at any point in life, you just sit still and watch your mind like a movie. In the type of movie you watch, it all has to do where it's as if the unknown is like this strange intelligent universe, and when a human being as a conscious thought maneuvers in the inner realms, the way they are holding their character is kind of like what they are bringing to that universe, right? We have feared our own intelligence, so we have not understood it properly. This is very natural, but now the calling of an advanced civilization has arose. That means the moment one human being thought of the idea, it was the moment where it was like one signal, spread. If you notice, if people look at waves, like in a pond, in the still pond, if you throw one rock and then you throw another rock after, the waves actually, even though they pass through each other, they are not disturbed by each other. The wave goes till the end of the pond. So when you throw the rock, the wave goes towards the end of the pond, and it doesn't care for whatever waves are coming. So the moment a human being has had the idea of the advanced civilization, the moment somebody had the idea of the castle in the sky, there began the greatest legend of humanity, a future legend, coming soon to, a civilization. Oh man, it's hilarious how we're all being the periodic table right now, Can you imagine there's some, like, if there was 100%, there must have been a group of people in history who they were like, yo, we're gonna worship air because without it we die, you know what I mean? Oh man, I'm being playful, guys. In reality, the ancients had a vision that we have lost. There was this game called Assassin's Creed, and of course it's a pretty intense game, and it's kind of depicting history but through a cyberspace through a sci-fi angle. But anyways, the idea of it is that the main character in this video game finds himself at the top of buildings, and then he has this ability called ego vision. And it's as if like his instincts infused with his intuition, provide him with like next level concentration, something like that, right? So it's as if we human beings have ego vision, but we have forgotten it, right? And ego vision, in some sense, I would say, is how you are not just relying on the information of your eyes. You are relying on how your moment being the primary information of direct experience. The world we have built so far as creatures, to me, it's like an advanced spaceship debris, right? To me, the type of intelligence that can be found in the space-time continuum, oh my god. Not only is there individual intelligence here, not only is there bodies moving, not only is there the intelligence of bodies to transform, not only is there the intelligence of collective rhythms, for example, collective human movements or human beings being in some sense one with the rhythms of the universe, or how the yogis like Guru Baba, he was such a next level mystic that it was as if he had an antenna, and what he would do is like he would suddenly just for no reason start walking towards a specific nation, and when he would get to the border of that nation was in trouble and needed his help. Like, his stories are so epic. Guru Baba is something that he must be taught in history class, where history teachers are clueless. Because man's history is not just physical events, it is how those physical events created an opportunity for human eyes that existed once to see and share. And guys, I need a quick intermission, a 10-minute intermission, and I'll be back. So I'll just write it here in case somebody's new. Imagine in the 10-minute intermission, somebody's like, this podcast has such incredible emptiness in it. Okay. Okay, so I'm back, guys. Where to begin? Type being used in a religious context where there's a father to the universe. There's a source, intelligent source to the universe. As if the minds of religious people on the planet is actually the will of one God, right? So it's one collective being. So I would say all people of one religion, or let's say an institution of thought, they are actually being a collective being. Because think about it, imagine an invisible cloud just finds itself on the earth, and it goes to like one city, and all the people in the city are behaving exactly in accordance to the command of that invisible cloud, for example, right? And literally that same thing is happening in institutions, in ideological institutions, whether it's religious, whether it's secular, whether it's cultural, whether it's fictional, non-fiction, you know what I mean? There's so many types of things and projects going on this earth where I'll be like human beings. They're much like, just like how cavemen made fire, similarly found fire, discovered fire. Similarly, we are discovering beyond our inner universes about what is actually going on in the world. If let's say there's 1,000 people and they're part of this group, okay, and let's say that group has a leader, and the group leader says, all of you stand on one leg, right? And let's say it's a sort of dictatorship. Okay, so in that group, all those people who are part of the group, they're like, okay, we're following this system of thought, all right, everybody goes on one leg. So that would be equivalent whether there was a physical leader giving a vocal command, or if it was an invisible moving force moving everybody at the same time, it would be the same. So do you see how I'm saying ideological systems have possessed people to in some sense, strangely, chaotically show us the greater order of the collective mind, right? So it's as if what I mean by that is that there is right now an era of artificial collectivity. It's fine, it's natural, it happens, to all civilized. It's like all civilizations suffer from evil. Come on, guys. What I mean is that a man is a creature that is moving in the space-time continuum, and information from outside of himself can point him towards something that is not himself, right? That's why I keep saying to be human first in whatever reality you're in. Right, we have appeared in the human biology. That means in our inner realms we require to be also human, right? So we want to start from very simple human psychology, and then be like, hey, there's known studies in the future educational system and unknown studies, and those who care about unknown studies, they actually are those human beings who are, as if, imagine all human beings on the planet, all advanced communicators active in the human consciousness, is, imagine for a moment all human beings treated themselves as if they were crew members of Spaceship Earth, as Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller have said. Imagine every human being, the moment they reach a certain age of capability, they run to the advanced civilization, and they're like, what needs work? What needs assistance? What needs advancement? As if they ask the person, what do you do in your spare time? It's like, advanced civilization, bro. What do you do? Imagine some members of, crew members of spaceship Earth. They are there. They are active to, in some sense, handle all the past problems of the planet, all the relationships the planet has with its past. And imagine certain amount of crew members of spaceship Earth. They immediately run to handle the problems that are in the present. Those who are billionaires, those who are elites, those who are powerful, influential people on the planet. You are here to respond to the present, not to the future, not to the past. Right? So world leader, it's kind of another way of saying we gotta handle what's happening on Earth before we can actually stand on the sky. And certain crew members, they focus on the future, right? So we, in some sense, for the first time, establish planetary global identity. No longer we care to judge people from infinite archetypes can be accessed through invisible, a responsibility for the invisible, and the invisible through the void. It's as if like duality's last stand before it enters the void. In some senses, to evoke the infinite. That means any creature in a dualistic system, the moment they go through a transformation of duality, it's as if the infinite and the singular dimensions are at war, or there are two collapsing dimensions as the dualists are kind of like vanishing. So what I'm trying to get to is that in religion, an example of an infinite archetype was the knowledge of God through the conscious man. So in some sense, you can say the prophets in religions were infinite archetypes. They had access to an endless truth. And this is, of course, I'm saying this through a theological lens. That means if you care for theology, that's how you would consider it. So the concept of God was one approach towards the infinite archetype, let's say. the concept of the immortal human was another approach to the infinite archetype. The concept of, sorry guys, I'm coughing a lot. Another concept of an infinite archetype would be an AI. That means, like, imagine an android walking on the street and you're like, hey android, and this android is not the android, it is one collective AI mind that has access to such information that to us it would appear as infinite. So I would say there's the AI cyberspace infinite archetype. Then there's the infinite archetype, I would say, of the yogi. This kind of falls under the God idea I was saying, but the yogi pretty much stopped doing everything and identified as the whole universal event as a conscious being. So that would be a sort of, and even going beyond an infinite archetype, going beyond the language there. That means, again, duality's last stand before the void is the infinite. I would say another example of an infinite archetype could be an extraterrestrial intelligence that is just superior beyond the elemental. That means there could be a sort of invisible value to the infinite archetype and a visible value to the infinite archetype. The visible category would be like the concept of immortals, the concept of immortal human beings, the concept of immortal technology, the concept of immortal extraterrestrials, for example. And the invisible would be, in some sense, the God that is omnipresent, omniscient, that is oceanic in nature, kind of like close to Spinoza's God, where Spinoza was like, yo, the whole universe is happening, that's God. The whole thing is God. And of course, the whole thing is inconceivable, so in some sense is a pointer to how God is inconceivable. What's hilarious is that the concept of heaven and hell, those inside it, that means you think about, like, okay, somebody goes to hell, it's like an infinite loop. You go to heaven, it's like an infinite loop. And I would say you can say the yogi would kind of like walk in nature as the whole nature. I've had moments where I've walked in parks, and for a second it's like it didn't matter if I was walking or not. I was like part of the nature of the world. I was as natural as the tree and the scenery. Humanism is really the shadow of nature, but the shadow will realize that light is really its origin. I would technically say the concept of energy can be seen as an infinite archetype. So anytime we are going beyond the void, the singular, and the dual, we have most likely access to the infinite state, the infinite dimension to the realm. where ideas cannot be born and they cannot die. There is no personality. There is just all knowing at once. You see, because the suffering of the human being is not the story of its karma. The suffering of the human being is it has not understood that the unknown was here first. When one realizes the unknown is here first, this whole triangular relationship of self, other, and world, they all become unknown. So you become an unknown self in an unknown world, and others are also unknown intelligence, and you begin functioning like this. And you know what happens when you function like this? Thoughts don't attach to you like gum on your shoe, and so you swift your way throughout the day. And you are watching as everything is unknown. That means there is no ego of someone knowing anymore. It's just like how intelligent movement is its own experiential information. You know, there was someone who's like, I want to connect to contact the spirit of my ancestors, and the person's like, buddy, you are being the spirit of your ancestors right now. The only active model, to me, existence is like a language that a multidimensional being has heard and has not changed. I would say that we should not fear any of these four states of mind. We should not fear emptiness. We should not fear an ultimate singularity of intelligence. We should not fear the reign of chaos, the endless war, or poetically the immortal warfare between chaos and order. Or the gods and giants were on the shoulders, or attention up, or attention in. 2021 is that moment in history where a species had evolved enough to have a personality, and all that was left was to release the libraries of the inner realms. And what that means is there's an information that is kind of like baked bread, and then there's an information that is in some sense raw, directly being accessed without any sort of editing to it. That information really comes from the authenticity of the human being in being true to the temporary walk in the lifetime. When it comes to the intelligence and behavior is a type of instantaneous intelligence. One's relationship as space with their attention is in some sense one freeing the concept from the context. You see, when you realize this model of 0-1 to infinity, when you understand that all of these have a relationship and an interdependence, that means in any moment you can notice, for example, right now there's a teacup in front of me. I can see the absence of this teacup. I could see how there's only this teacup in this universe, the singular dimension, the one dimension. I could see that this teacup is in some sense, there's a world in it and it's separate from the world, there's a dual dimension, right? And then I can see that this teacup is in some sense the infinite archetype of the universe, as if this teacup is the truth. It's not just holding tea, it is holding the truth of all that attention can be. So you see what I mean? So I can in some sense just like take an object or a subject as a point And in some sense, the 0, 1 to infinity are like lines intersecting this point. And so I would say this would be a sort of neo relationship beyond thought. That means the word thought is outdated and even misunderstood from the beginning. And ultimately, duality is like we repeat the pattern infinitely or we gracefully enter the void, and either way, life is an experiential thing. In the chat section, Yusuf says, Mr.Within, keep explaining deeper this unknown self plus unknown world. Remember, it's not just unknown self plus unknown world, it's also plus unknown other. So this is the equation, right? There we go. This is kind of like the equation. So what I'm trying to say here with the unknown world and unknown self is that right now, for example, I'm talking as a known self. My known self is the biological body, and it's also my name and form. My name is Amin, and I'm using this online name list, for example, Mr.Within, and my personality and whatnot, right? So that's my known self. And when I look at the world outside, I'm like, yeah, like I'm right now giving this podcast on a balcony, right? So that's my known world. So I found the known self in the known world. Then imagine I saw this. I was like, all right, I saw myself in the mirror, and I also saw, the universe to some degree, as a human being experientially. That means I access the known dimensions of reality and walk through them. The only thing that would be left is your unknown. So it's this poetic way of saying, after the known guru has taught you, only the unknown guru is left. That means the unknown becomes your guru. That means there never was a destiny where there was a student and teacher. That shit was just an idea that just happened to arise in the realm. What is going on? Even though our species for so many years through oral transmission, that means we had to vocally kind of pass down history before we could write it on paper. People don't realize what kind of an incredible evolution of communication we have gone through so far. Our ancestors were really advanced communicators because they had no choice. Whether we celebrate the day a nation was born, or we celebrate the day that we were born, or we celebrate the day, that the whole universal event came place, and eventually when somebody lives as a known self in a known world, and you live long enough in this world, you will eventually get signs from the unknown. Spiritual people, get super excited, and they're like, the divine's talking to me, the divine's giving me signs, through birds and people and numbers on clocks and all this. There's sort of Jungian synchronistic embrace of the unknown through spiritual mindset. But I am telling you, it's just when the unknown comes to meet you. So imagine there's a human being on this earth, and this human being shouts at the world, at everything that could possibly be there, and the human being says, I'm going to live as my known self in the world that I can know as far as possible, and if there is in some sense the unknown, come and meet me. I'm busy living the known life in the known world. And then in your life, you begin to realize all the empty spaces provide an ability to bring in the new. So then the question has to be asked, is novelty actually the disguise of the unknown before consciousness reframes or realigns? in the inner realms, the ultimate thing we can do is advanced communication, and I have made that synonymous within the concept of nirvana, moksha, enlightenment, and self-realization. That means that behind our eyes, I want the species to quickly run towards an enlightened society, and in front of our eyes, I want an advanced civilization, and that really means there isn't too much an emotional resolve. There is more like a strategy implemented, right? As if man retaliated before extinction devoured him, right? That means we have to hold the jaws of extinction and use all the technologies and tools accessible. That means for a second, imagine all human beings forgot about all the good and bad things they're doing. And for a moment, sorry guys, hang on. I gotta put a tissue over my teacup, or it's gonna attract a different audience. Life is our ability. Anybody who is alive is able. Now, every human being, based on how they're raised, or any sort of epigenetical factors or inside the genetics factors, right? Regardless of what is your design as a human being. If you have a skeleton, and you have a shape, you have a body that's functionable, like you can function. In some sense, cultivating a relationship with emptiness, we become fearless. Cultivating a relationship with the singular, we become endlessly loving, we become compassionate. Cultivating a relationship with the dual, we become beautiful. Chaos and order is really beautiful, guys. As much as people are like, yo man, it's a freaking illusion, I'm telling you, it's an incredibly beautiful illusion. That means in my mind, in my inner realms, I have fast forwarded the idea of civilization, just in my kind of like a hobby. In my spare time, I wonder about what in civilization can advance, and what that advancement implies for the psychology of other wave of human beings arriving. So in this episode, just to sort of conclude the title, what I meant by the meshing of infinite archetypes with human psychology is that through this model of the 0, 1 to infinity, the ring of the absent heaven, and also this triangular relationship of the circle being nature, and inside nature we find the self, we find others, and we find the world. So from that kind of relationship, and in an acknowledgement of all the dimensions of self, all the dimensions of others and their self, and all the dimensions of the whole world, man finds himself having no choice other than to start behaving like a universal being. And to start like a universal to start behaving like a universal being means you have to be aware of how the universe is, and then you are. You see, that's the wisdom of the Zen masters. They realize that any moment of ideology or of expression of persona can be instantly just paused like a video game, and emptiness would remind the person of the true nature. So that means we don't fear infinity. That means it's like it's 1/4. We don't fear duality. It's 1/4 of reality. We don't fear the singular. It's 1/4 of reality. We don't fear the void. It's 1/4 of reality. And that which is witnessing all of them at once, there is no God and man anymore. That means man went to heaven and it was over. It was when time, like a fog around the human species, disappeared. and the fog cleared up, and for a moment an era of multidimensional behaviorism will come. This era of multidimensional behaviorism means that human beings will be educated not on conceptual thoughts. That means children don't have to take notes in schools anymore, but they have to, in some sense, share their simulations of the world. And what I'm trying to say is that I want, just like how the educational system currently, it was kind of influenced by a time of war where soldiers had to, from one bunker, memorize information and run to another bunker and exactly relay what happened. Right? So it was based on a time of war. That means, believe it or not, warfare inspired how the educational system is today, with the intensity of examinations, rather than the teachers caring if the kid understood it. Rather, the teachers like, all right, you got a numerical percentage. It's like, I don't care what happens to you after this grade, just go forth. Right? So the educational system is like Cirque du Soleil, you know, but even Cirque du Soleil is laughing at it, you know. In the future, children will be treated as if their imagination is sacred. That means the mind of a child is a sacred space. Now, children, they are like sponges that they absorb at first the behaviorism of their environment. Then, as they learn language and their personalities and how they see themselves in the mirror, as Jacques Lacan says, the mirror effect, after that point, the child begins having a subjective relationship with itself. But first, it has an objective, and the language of objective reality is body language, right? You know, a person can be an incredibly conscious person, but they might not realize they have mustard on their jacket. You see what I mean? Like, you know, imagine this disciple comes to this guru. It's like, is it true that if you have mustard on your jacket, you're not enlightened, sir? You know, and the enlightened guru is like, what kind of question is that, man? Like, you know, I wanted to eat something. Anyways, I want to promote the creative state, the creative state and the vision of the artist. The creative state and the vision of the artist is the explorer's vision. That means we can say the artist archetype is the last dance in modern culture of the explorer archetype. That means artists are human beings that they are shifting their inner realms quicker than others. So people think they're creative, but what they're doing is that they're actually living in a faster storyline behind their eyes. You know, it's a speed thing, creativity, believe it or not. And it's not just speed, it is intent. And intent is kind of like Cyclops from the X-Men, where it's like laser beams from your eyes, you know what I mean? An advanced civilization means we looked at our environment in an advanced way. And if we haven't now in history, the only thing left is to do that, you know? That means if I didn't talk about the advanced civilization, eventually someone would, you know? And you know, I do feel like someone who finished the marathon, but like... But all of it is just the fulfillment of just why the concept of the castle in the sky was in our history. Why that imagery was ever there, you know, as if kings look at the sky and it's like, I wish I could build my palace up there. Nobody could attack me anymore. And of course, guys, I'm just one person sharing just blueprints of how I have perceived so far, right? So keep in mind, there's a reason I say Mr. Within, because I want to speak as if I am nothing and everything, really. Every person, and I don't know, like, here's the thing. Let me say that when I'm speaking, I'm talking about problems that I have solutions for and problems that I have no clue what's going to happen in the future. One of those is how it's going to be possible for 8 billion human beings to stabilize their psychology so that their inner realms don't start war. Right? That's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know how that's going to happen. It's like the lovebirds of the world are responsible for that future. What I mean is that it's the heart of man. There are some wars where the brain of the brain of the person is like, at the front lines, and there's some wars where the heart of the person is. Someone who I consider who has in some sense accessed even beyond the infinite archetype is someone who I mentioned earlier by the name of Guru Padmasambhava. And I want to read for the audience some of his quotes. Sorry guys, I'm just looking for this quote tunnel hang in there. Okay, so Guru Padmasambhava says there are 7 types of corruption. Okay, so I'm going to read this for you. This is so Master Padma is Guru Padmasambhava. So Guru Padmasambhava in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, he's like the second Buddha. But he's also such an enlightened being that he wasn't born into the world, just like how Mary in the honor of the Christian tradition was like a virgin, and God was the archetype of the father. Right? I would say in the Guru Padmasambhava narrative, Guru Padmasambhava at the age of 8 just manifested at the center of a pond, and the moment he manifested, he straight away went to enlighten the lake spirits. That's literally like written in the tradition. But anyways, and then a king finds him and adopts him. Like, that's the next level part. But anyways, I'll read this for you. Guru Padmasambhava. So it says, Master Padma said, when practicing the Dharma, there are 7 types of corruption. The lady asked, what are they? The master said, if your faith is small while your intelligence is great, you become corrupted by considering yourself a teacher. If you have many listeners while your self-regard is high, you become corrupted by considering yourself a spiritual friend. If you assume superior qualities while not having taken the Dharma to heart, you become corrupted by considering yourself a leader. If you give oral instructions while not practicing them yourself, you become corrupted by being an insensitive Dharma expert. If you're fond of senseless babble while lacking the Dharma in your heart, you become corrupted by being a craving yogi, charlatan yogi. If you have little learning while lacking the oral instructions, you become corrupted by being a commoner through your faith, though your faith may be great. A genuine practitioner who acts in accordance with the true teachings should liberate his being with intelligence, tame his mind with faith, cut misconceptions with listening to teachings, cast away social concerns, mingle his mind with the Dharma, perfect his knowledge with learning and reflecting, resolve his mind with the oral instructions, and gain final certainty through the view and meditation. That, however, is difficult. Okay. So guys, the last sentence where he says, and gain final certainty through the view and meditation. This is in some sense, I would say, the ultimate state. It is the aim of like one's dharma, which is their approach to their karma. We are just explorers in a world that we're in once, and our voices are just realities that we hope that they echo on. That was an incredible quote by Guru Padmasambhava. Some quotes, open your eyes before you even realize you have like additional sight, So this next one is just, it's titled Advice, and so Master Padma said, whatever actions you engage in, do not do anything non-dharmic that fails to become the accumulation of merit and wisdom. Do not desire anything other than omniscient Buddhahood and benefiting sentient beings. Do not be attached to anything. Attachment itself is the root of bondage. Do not criticize other teachings and do not disparage people. All the teachings are ultimately indivisible, like the taste of salt. Do not criticize any of... This is a point to how there are universals in reality. So Guru Padmasambhava says all the teachings are ultimately indivisible. Excuse me, guys. All the teachings are ultimately indivisible, like the taste of salt. Do not criticize any of the higher or lower vehicles. They are identical in being the path to be journeyed, just like the steps on a staircase. You cannot know another person unless you can perceive with super knowledge. So do not criticize others. In general, all sentient beings are by their very nature spontaneously perfect Buddhas. They possess the essence of enlightenment. Do not examine other people's faults or delusions. Do not examine the limitations of others. Examine how you can change your own. Do not examine the shortcomings of others, but examine your own shortcomings. The greatest of evils is to hold religious prejudice and to criticize other people without knowing their minds. So give up prejudice as if it were poison. The next quote is about renunciation. And I'll read a few more. These are incredible quotes, guys. I hope, paper and pen have found you somehow. So the next quote is from Guru Padmasambhava, says, transcendent renunciation is developed by meditating on the preciousness of human life in terms of the ocean of evolutionary possibilities, the immediacy of death, the inexorability of evolutionary causality, and the sufferings of the ignorance-driven involuntary life cycle. Renunciation automatically occurs when you come face to face with your real existential situation, and so develop a genuine sympathy for yourself. Having given up pretending the prison of habitual emotions and confusions is just fine. Meditating on the teachings given on these themes in a systematic way enables you to generate quickly an ambition to gain full control of your body and mind in order at least to face death confidently, knowing you can navigate safely through the dangers of further journeys. Wasting time investing your life in purposes that, in quotations, you cannot take with you become ludicrous. And when you radically shift your priorities, you feel a profound relief at unburdening yourself of a weight of worry over inconsequential things. So he's pretty much saying, when you notice how the unknown's relationship with the moment is, in some sense, the sort of attached suffering that we can't take with us to the other dimension is like, it doesn't bother us. The next, and let's say the final thing I'm going to read about this Guru Padmasambhava quote tunnel segment of the episode. I think tonight's a perfect night to celebrate the Dharma, See, even other species are celebrating the Dharma, guys, Guru Padmasambhava says, in regards to practicing the true Dharma, he says, do like this if you want to practice the true Dharma. Keep your master's oral instructions in mind. Don't conceptualize your experience, as it just makes you attached or angry. Day and night, look into your mind. If your stream of mind contains any non-virtue, renounce it from the core of your heart and pursue virtue. Moreover, when you see other people committing evil, feel compassion for them. It is entirely possible that you will feel attachment to or aversion for certain sense objects. Give that up. When you feel attachment towards something attractive or aversion towards something repulsive, understand that to be your mind's delusion, nothing but Understand that to be your mind's delusion, nothing but a magical illusion. That means our likes and dislikes are just like a hollow subjective overlay. That's kind of what he's saying. Of course, this is mysticism, guys. Mysticism is not for the faint of heart. It's really for everyone, but you know what I mean. And so I'll continue. So he says, understand that to be your mind's delusion, nothing but a magical illusion. When you hear pleasant or unpleasant words, understand them to be an empty resounding, like an echo. When you encounter severe misfortune and misery, understand it to be a temporary occurrence, a deluded experience. Recognize that the innate nature is never apart from you. To obtain a human body is extremely difficult, so it is foolish to ignore the Dharma once having found it. Only the Dharma can help you. Everything else is worldly beguilement. So guys, this was an incredible thing. I'm going to share the link of this in the chat section. You know, this is definitely something to share. This is Guru Padmasambhava. Yusuf is saying, who is saying this? This is Guru Padmasambhava. It's a quote tunnel of Guru Padmasambhava. He's a Tibetan figure, you know. And really, there's just been so many ways that human beings have been human beings that ultimately a person will find their own value in regards to the geometry of what they have access to. Like right now, I'm looking at in the distance, you know, and I don't have my glasses on, so all I see is like blurry lights, you know. You know, and so like that's the access, you know, of the moment, right? But when I put on my glasses, that access changes, as if something that was unauthorized in clarity suddenly becomes authorized in clarity. Really what it is we just want kind of have like, as if it's like a terminal in a airport, as if it's like the Earth terminal, you know, as if people are here actually in a middle way, you know, they are like it's as if like being on Earth is like being on a bridge, you know. It's like walking across a bridge. Walking across a bridge where behind you it's like emptiness and in front of you is infinity. And so like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game show, it's like, you know, what do you choose? Oh dear human being, your breath is your greatest teacher, because without it there would be no student. The secret of life is being here. That is the greatest clue and the final there. My final comments on this episode, this podcast episode. Our psychologies will eventually access infinite archetypes. It's just gonna, for now, if I was to explain it to people, it just means the future is gonna be weird. The future is gonna be, it's gonna be strange in the sense that multidimensionality is an authorization, so we will for the first time have human psychology be able to repeat itself and live quicker in the inner realms than the outer realms. Or I would tell you, like, it's like we haven't reached the epitome of the expression of the human personality. We have maybe uncovered 35% of the human personality. That other 65% is really like we're waiting for those worlds to arise. And imagine the day where the species is civilizing the first day of an advanced civilization in motion, the first successful sky city that human beings made. I'm predicting this 600 years from now. The sooner the better, the later the worse. Sky city technology. The first day we have an actual city in the sky would be one of the greatest human achievements against extinction. As if our species from the beginning of time has been in battle, in combat with the unknown. And I'm just adding a poetic dimension to this by saying this, but it's as if we have been at war in the unknown and we have lost. That means human beings, the only way we have succeeded so far is that we have managed as a genetical pattern to keep passing on the pattern. There's the story about Einstein, and this hilarious story I remembered, where Einstein meets Marilyn Monroe, evidently, and Marilyn Monroe looks at Einstein and says, "Can you imagine our kids? Imagine they had my beauty and your intelligence. Imagine what kind of kids we would have." And then Einstein says, "Can you also imagine?" So Einstein hears that and very chalantly, responds to Marilyn Monroe and says, "Can you imagine if our child has my beauty and your intelligence?" You know what I mean? And it's kind of like this. It's like this incredible kind of like Einstein, being OP. You know what I mean? So, anyways, the idea is like. It could be anything. We don't know really what the future is. We're like 8 billion generals in a tent, right? And we're trying to make battle plans with what do we do with that future of a species, right? That's like the only problem to solve. It's pretty much the problem that has encapsulated any other problem. Like, so we can say there are problems where like a person's plumbing system is like not working properly. That's a problem. Then there's a problem of like, in some sense, how long can, in some sense, the surface of this earth contain endlessly arising individual personalities. That means it's as if like we don't want to overcrowd ourselves, and at the same time we want to be free and do whatever we want, right? So we have to start building a world which is in some sense an endless trailer for paradise. That means it doesn't matter what technologies we have when it comes to actually sharing the new ethos of civilization and the emergence of civilization 2.0. It's as if it's as if we are making our own legend for the first time. For the first time, 8 billion human beings decided to start a project, and this project was aimed at trying to see if paradise was possible to be on Earth. And in the future, hopefully, if I have resources, and people can feel free to become members, if I have resources in the future, I will start like these philosophers' millennium questions. So the millennium questions are these famous mathematical mysteries and theorems and I would say, which in some sense have not been these mysterious mathematical equations that have not been proved, right? And any mathematician who solves this gets $1 million, legit gets $1 million prize by this institution. And some of them have, some people have gotten the $1 million, and there was some guy who was such a next level human being that he didn't even accept the prize, but he solved the problem, right? So he managed to prove like a mathematical mystery of the reality. Now, if I had the resources, in the future, I would definitely create a sort of a philosophy questions, and I would, in some sense, of course, not just only incorporate the three branches of metaphysics. That means not only do we want human beings to look at cosmology, not only do we want human beings to look at nature and intelligence, so you can say a sort of natural theology. So, sorry guys, I'm looking for something to show the viewers to share on the video. The wallpaper. As soon as I find this. Sorry guys, I'm still looking for this. There's this picture I gotta show the listeners, and it just kind of saves me time from explaining it. There we go. So we have, actually, hold on. Oh, there we go. So we have ontology, natural theology, and universal science. Ontology is us studying how existence is here. Natural theology is how we're studying intelligence being present in nature's intelligence. And I would say universal science is pretty much establishing a method to engage the cosmos, right? You could say religion is a method to engage the cosmos. You could say the scientific method is a method, to engage the cosmos. You could say the mystical mindset could be said to be a sort of way to establish a relationship with the universal presence of reality. And so here's the picture. I'm going to post it here. Just hang on, guys. There we go. So this is actually a tree for anybody who wants to learn philosophy very quickly. Philosophy, I mean, there's a relationship of the idea. That means there's philosophical visions of the past. There is how you are alive right now in the sense of your own philosophy, and then there's going to be philosophies in the future, or how ideas travel through time, right? So in this picture, from this incredible, logo, branches of philosophy. So if people just look at this, I'm going to try to explain these to the best of my ability. And this is very important because what I was telling you when it comes to metaphysics, it hasn't drawn it here, but the three branches of metaphysics is the whole thing of cosmology. What was it? Cosmology, natural theology, and I don't know why I keep missing the third one. Ontology. Yeah, so we're looking at existence, we're looking at the intelligence in existence, and then we're looking at the size of existence. You know, this is like the three branches of metaphysics so far. So imagine philosophy is a tree, and why is philosophy a tree? First of all, philosophy, I mean, I guess I'll just go into this. So the human being is a creature that has suddenly realized it is human and has started asking questions. And the only way we have started asking questions is because the brain developed to a point where it could somehow hold images of the moment, even though it changed and went on into the future. So our memories is the kind of like the engine of our questions, you know. Or our knowledge is our beginning point to really start having a relationship with the unknown. So human beings open their eyes on the planet. It's like, where am I? What am I? Who am I? What is this? What is that? It's, oh my God. Like we were all, do you see what I mean? The human mind began to act like as if like we teleported here and we're like, what's going on? What's that? What's this? Do you see what I mean? So human beings have been explorers just by design. Like that's how we've succeeded in evolution. That's how hunter-gatherer tribes kind of made it. So for the philosopher in the modern era, 2020 and onwards, where I've said the era of advanced communication has come. So let's say a person begins to be like, okay, so each question I ask is an access point to the universal idea, the reality of the universal idea. So first we go to the right, because to go in historic order, we see theology. Okay, guys? So I'm going into the theology branch on the screen. And when it comes to theology, that means human beings they noticed that they came from people and they wondered that if the universe had a creator, right? So it is a huge part of philosophy. Pretty much philosophy is kind of like a library of how human psychology happened on Earth. Okay? That means the philosopher is like the older brother of the psychologist, and the psychologist is the older brother of the scientist. You see what I mean? And the mystic is the older brother of the philosopher. But anyways, those are just an archetypal relationship. So we go through theology, human beings, we're like, oh my God, there's an intelligent source of the universe. Then there was the concept of deduction, and deduction means we saw a big thing and we made a small conclusion about it, right? There was this giant universe of endless unknown, and then there was revelation, for example, in the religious context, and that revelation became a deduction of like very huge significance for peoples on this planet. So that's the sort of thing where it was the relationship of seeing something big and taking something small from it, or understanding it in a small way. And then we have, in some sense, the other branch. So as we go forward through time, and we're also noticing the evolution of global culture and society, we in some sense get to a point where the modern man is not really actually story oriented. Like we're not telling ourselves like stories of, you know, gods and legend all the time, but man is kind of like a pilot, like a vehicle. You know, that means it's like driving a vehicle is really an incredibly like, you know, non-emotional, just design and movement and expression oriented thing. I don't know how to say it, but it's as if like there's something pure to a logic that stays true to the sensory perception, but when the sensory perception is shaky, then the logic has to be able to have a backup system or experience a collapsing point, right? And then a new stream of logic, a new simulation of a logic arises, you know? So in logic, it is in some sense the opposite of the religious model, the religious pattern. right? So the religious pattern saw a big thing and made a small conclusion. Logic is making small, is seeing something small in the big, and in some sense, making a conclusion on the big. Do you see? So it's as if from the small we're going to the big, where for deduction it was from the big going to the small. Do you see what I mean? So logic and science, the whole point of empirical evidence is that we're actually testing the sensation-oriented nature of the physical universe, right? But the whole physical universe is also being a simulation of our brain neurochemistry, right? So there's a lot to this. Now we go to this where, let's go to the next branch. The next branch is actually before I go to the central branch, realism and cosmology, I'm actually going to start from the left branch, the far left, right? So eventually we had a separation of church and state, and then here we have political philosophy as a branch of philosophy, because any event or game, right, or simulation that the human mind has been engaged with falls under philosophy to discover what can be the truth for the psychology of an animal, in the void. Right, so when it comes to political philosophy, and we're in some sense seeing the effect of individuals into developing systems that now have a causal role in the experience of the individual. Right, so what that means is it's pretty much the evolution of the hunter-gatherers, left us into a resource kind of Hunger Games, right? So that's where political philosophy comes in, and philosophers back in the day, like the kings and the emperors of, and the queens and the, empresses of like ancient times, they in some sense. They treated philosophers as if they are a lantern. A philosopher is a lantern in a world where every the meaning of it wants to keep being consumed and just rendered singular, right? Who said life has to be a photograph that the human being understands? It's an endlessly changing film, right? So political philosophy has to do with how the worldview of all these creatures on this earth has affected their approach to the world, Then we have metaphysics, which at the beginning of the talk and the whole talk was kind of aimed at in regards to metaphysics. And the word meta means after. So anytime you hear the word metaphysics, we're wondering about that beyond the physics. And what is after the physics? The physics are a sensory reception of the world, right? It's like what we call physical. It's like, oh my God, that's my 1/5 of my senses of the sensation of touch. You see what I mean? Like that. So metaphysics, that which is after the physics, that which is beyond the sensory perception, that's what metaphysics is. And the way it has taken place kind of also is parallel to epistemology. Why? Epistemology is our theory on knowledge, right? So human beings have been living in life, and they've looked at life like a film and experientially directly, and they're like, all right, let me share my opinion. And their opinion has been the theory of knowledge. That means really we're just on some elemental level, some existential level, just creatures making sound, right? If like an extraterrestrial was watching me give a podcast, he'd be like, okay, this is just a creature making a sound. You see what I mean? But the sound has meaning to our collective acceptance, right? And this is where the concept of law actually becomes beautiful, right? But usually, or at least now, law is very ugly in the sense that it's not updating as fast as the consciousness of the human species deserves. Not that there's anything wrong with the law. The law is an incredible system to be understood, right? But at the same time, this incredible system has to honor its own sense of value, its own axiology, and in order for it to honor its own axiology, it has to seek endless improvement. And endless improvement means the greatest paradise on earth, if in regards to mental mindsets, is a win-win. That's all we're aiming for. Everybody wins if we are intelligent enough as a species. It's totally possible. So anyways, metaphysics, we're looking at beyond the physics. We're trying to find the fences of our knowledge, Then, and as we, let's say, look beyond that fence, we have theories on knowledge.
And then you see in when that branch that at the top end of it is epistemology, there's the word aesthetics and ethics, okay? And so I'll start with ethics, or I'll start with aesthetics first. Aesthetics has to do with the shape of the moment, right? So philosophers were like, what am I looking at? And that was the aesthetics of the moment of existence, right? So when it comes to aesthetics, it's really taking the sensory perception, a branch of philosophy that is really trying to be observant, and aware of what the senses are doing, or what they are, or where they are, which is the bigger mystery, because our senses create location instantaneously, but where are the senses? If we need the senses to have a location, how could the senses be in a location? Do you see what I mean? So that would be a sort of mystery in the branch of, I would say, the aesthetic branch of philosophy. And aesthetics could also mean about the expression of the inner realms and the outer realms. Like in the world, there's this whole concept of, for example, fashion. What is that? That means the human being is sharing their inner universe on themselves. Like, if one day the person feels blue and they just dress blue. Then we go to the final branch, at least in this diagram, of cosmology and realism. And this is where it gets serious, guys. This is where this is a very cool moment, because I kind of feel like someone introducing the next generation of the greatest philosophers to themselves, really. That's how I feel, right? So what is it? Is cosmology and realism. And realism has to do with our direct local experience of the world. And cosmology has to do with a consideration of our non-local potential. That means when we say cosmos, we're saying everything. Everything. The word cosmos is like one of the most powerful words in the English language. Just in language, because it is in some sense the subjective container for the totality of all that is, you see. So cosmology is a very, I would say it's, of course I would totally remodel the educational system, but anyways, cosmology is crucial. Cosmology is like questions of the advanced civilization's future kind of fall in that. Realism means there's a world we see behind our eyes, and there's a world we're in front of our eyes. What possible relationship can our inner realm and outer realm have with each other? And what is the value? What is the value of the inner realm to in some sense have a relationship with the outer realm? And this tree of philosophy has so many more branches, and if the world is multidimensional, then in some sense our endings and beginnings are the same one. As a final remark for this episode, everybody should treat themselves as the most advanced communication of this universal sector, which for now the human species wears the crown of superior intelligence. The human species as an animal in the evolutionary road of creaturehood has surpassed the expectation of everything. We have done things as a species that it's like all the animals were either left behind, or we in some sense were never from here. And so the mysteries of the world echo on, and psychology every day wakes up and simulates reality and experiences, and then sleeps, and eventually at some point, it's as if the heart of hearts will suddenly roar, right? So imagine you're walking, in some moment, and suddenly from the sky, everybody on earth hears the celestial roar, as if a galactic lion is roaring in another dimension, and its echoes here hitting our dimension product. We must attain
fulfillment of the greatest vision. And I feel that is the cheat code in modern society's, bombardment of information. That really your honesty is the only connection to nature left before the world in some sense becomes artificial. We have to resist our desires or we will become robots pretty much in the future, and we have to prepare the psychology of the future generations. It's as if we don't have to, as an advanced civilization, we don't have to just be so advanced that if extraterrestrials land and have a mental invasion of human beings, we have defense systems for that. The advanced civilization is so advanced. And then the advanced civilization is so advanced that our own future, where we're fathoming, we're trying to take care. Imagine the advanced civilization, everyone in it, every person who was a parent became an incredible expert of a parent. And so all parents had successfully raised incredible children on the planet. And only the future generations were left to take care of. That would be a moment where the universal intelligence looks at the human species and we suddenly see there are two clouds that have made two letters and it's GJ, as if the universe is saying, good job, humanity, you woke up to yourselves. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for a little bit. Much blessings, honestly. And beyond philosophy, your eyes are your greatest teacher. That means every person must cultivate mastery over their own observance, over their own intelligence, over their own observance of their intelligence. Thank you for listening, guys. I hope this episode has helped you. Much blessings and honestly.